Another event we have occurring in 1864 is that Whistler's mother, of course, comes to live with him, and in 1866 he goes to Chile. They're not directly related, but maybe they are directly related. We'll get back to Whistler's mother here in a second. So he goes to Chile, and then he's there for just a very short time, but one of the important things that occurs while he's there is he paints one of his first Nocturne paintings, Nocturne in Blue and Gold. This wasn't the original title, but I understand it was changed to this later on. And this begins his series of nocturnes. Again, all of Whistler's paintings are named in a musical fashion because he thinks of it more as a musical composition of colors, if you will, rather than just being a picture or composition. But this begins his very famous attempts, if you will, to do a very difficult thing, and that is paint the night. It's also at this time that he does some very, very strange work once he kind of comes back. Paintings that look like this, that are extraordinarily abstract for the time period and really look almost out of place in terms of art history. If you look very closely at this, you can see the brush strokes very, very clearly. And again, the figures have really been reduced to a sense of pattern of line more than anything else. Again, it's hard to imagine that someone was painting compositions like this between 1864 and 1866. But again, this is evident within Whistler. He's experimenting. He's looking at different ways of exploring compositions and seeing what is available. And he's also reinventing himself and re-examining his education and thinking about what he should be doing with his art from this point forward. Here we have two more, Symphony in White and Red from 1868 and a Venus figure from around the same time. And again, extraordinarily abstract. It's very hard to even recognize these as being something from before 1900, but yet this is what Whistler was painting. If we look at the Venus figure, he's reduced the body of the woman to really a flat plane of flesh color, and again putting this in opposition with that sky blue, and we have these little red blotches that we can imagine to be butterflies, of course, with this being Whistler. On the left composition, a similar type of treatment, and again you imagine this to have almost a Japanese flair with the red object being almost red twice as a fan, and almost maybe a sun peeking above that extraordinarily high horizon line that we're finding. And we get to Arrangement in Gray and Black, #1, Portrait of the Artist's Mother, the actual title of this painting. And again, you hear so many different stories about this painting and how it came to be that Whistler had planned to do this wonderful portrait of his mother all the way down to the model simply didn't show up that day. And Whistler's mother was tired of standing because Whistler was not the quickest of portraits, so he actually had her sit. But the real important thing about this composition, if you will, is the real minimal aspects of color that he's actually using to create this. If you look at the color and the treatment of it, there's very, very minimal amounts. Again, just simply grays and blacks with a little bit of a flesh tone for the face. That's really the larger meaning and purpose behind this composition more than anything. And again, when we look at what Whistler is doing at this time period, a lot of these nocturnes, a lot of these paintings are really just about color, explorations of how colors work together in the sense of natural occurrences, but also how they work together in terms of composition. Here we have two paintings. I think they might be prints. Again, they're extraordinarily similar in composition. The only things I've really found that are different are the lights that you might see in the blue composition over on the left-hand side of the screen, which leads me to believe it might be a print. But again, what these are really about is color, blue and green, blue and silver, and how they work in unison to form the composition as much as they are about a scene at night. And again, this is really what Whistler's ideology is starting to become about. Here we have arrangement in black number 2, harmony in gray and green, and again, Whistler is receiving a large number of commissions at this time to do portraiture, which, you know, many of the artists that we speak about, this is really the bread and butter of what they do, is to do these type of portrait work. And when it comes to this type of service, Whistler was not really the most renowned at doing it, and especially in comparison to other artists like Sargent. He just would make people wait in impossible postures for incredibly long amounts of time, and would not let them move even a muscle. And even to the point that the story goes that Miss Alexander actually broke down at one point from the frustration of the occurrence of having to sit for Whistler for such a long time. Arrangement in gray and black, portrait of Thomas Carlyle. Again, with the original composition, arrangement in gray and black number 1 being Whistler's mother. Carlyle sat in for this to do like the second of the series, to kind of show as much as anything that the composition is about the colors more than it is about the sitting and the posture. Thomas Carlyle was a famous kind of eccentric historian, philosopher, poet type who lived during this time period. You'll notice the paintings on the wall, but of particular interest is if you look behind Carlyle, you'll see this kind of butterfly dragon symbol. This would be Whistler's little symbol that he had made for himself that starts appearing in some of his compositions. You can kind of try to find them as much as anything if you care to. So here we have more of these compositions that are about the idea of painting the night. And again, when we look at this and we start to really dissect what these paintings are about, they're much more about color and form than they are about anything else. In particular, when we look at Nocturne Gray and Silver from 1875 on the right, if you weren't informed that this was a scene at night, you might even question that this might be a completely abstract painting, even to the point of being non-objective. Again, this seems much more about the 3 rectangular forms that are occupying the composition than it is about it being a representation of anything physical or material from our world. Again, Whistler is painting the night, but in many ways I think he's one of the first people to kind of explore what compositions are. And that leads us to one of the more famous from the Nocturne series, Nocturne in Black and Gold, The Falling Rockets from 1875. Another scene at night, and the famous blotches of color would be, of course, fireworks exploding, raining down color upon the canvas, if you will, in a very beautiful type of fashion. If you look out, you can kind of see the outlines of boats or other forms. This painting is, of course, much more famous for the controversy it evokes than the actual painting itself. This will go on to cause Whistler quite a bit of controversy and be the second matter that will kind of lead to his bankruptcy, as I had referred to earlier. Very famously, we have a critic, and we know that Whistler was not very good with critics. He would actually write critics back at papers explaining his work when he would receive bad reviews. And the worst review he received was from John Ruskin, essentially wondering why one would charge so much for a painting such as this, and I believe he referred to it as flinging paint onto a canvas. And this led to the trial, the very famous trial of John Ruskin, where Whistler actually sues him for libel. And again, John Ruskin kind of comes from this older demographic of thinking about painting, where the ideology is really how much time you spend on a canvas should be equatable to how much it's worth. And in this, we kind of have the challenge from Whistler, where the ideology is that it's the training of the artist, and the artist ability to produce a piece of art that should account for the money rather than the amount of time that is spent on the canvas. And again, this is kind of one of these major breaking points in the philosophy of art. When we look at some of these other nocturnes, again, the whole point is that Whistler probably didn't spend that much time painting these canvases, as he even said in the trial. Most of the compositions of this nature he would maybe do in maybe 2 or 3 days, I believe. And again, this was challenged as the notion is if you're not spending that much time, then you shouldn't be. The painting isn't worth as much. And again, when you think about the paradigm of an artistic training versus the idea of the material worth or the craft idea of a painting, that either a painting is a piece, an object that is a craft, or that an object is made by an artist who is in some way insightful, in some presence. This is one of these critical moments where this argument first arises, and again, it's with Whistler. When we look at things like this, these beautiful scenes that he paints at night with these people kind of almost looking like spirits walking through the world rather than being part of our material plane, it really does kind of edge towards these concepts of abstraction that are embraced much later by artists, where again, you look at this and it's about the composition as much as it's about the representation of a scene. But again, a particularly lovely representation. You can even so much as see the breaking up of the brushstrokes in the upper left top corner, kind of a representation of how one might perceive the night in such a situation, with the smoke filling from cigarettes and other type of things one might imagine as we stroll through the night and see this wonderful scene. Whistler will continue to paint these nocturnes, and in many ways they become more and more challenging for the viewer. We have we have a painting on the left, and this is actually a print on the right that he did of these kind of nocturne scenes. And again, when we think of this painting on the left, this is almost a black on black composition where, this is almost pitch black midnight, and we're barely seeing the echo of the light filtering through these windows. And again, we take it for granted in some ways that nobody had really tried to accomplish this feat before, that if we look at the history of art and the idea that he's really trying to capture something that in some ways nobody has ever really tried to do in that sense, just this fleeting moment at night, and even what the night itself looks like as we register it and walk through compositions. This is kind of a unique point for the world of art. It's also at this time, around this time, that he very famously starts using as the model and eventually starts dating and has children with Maud Franklin. These are two compositions featuring her from the 1870s. They will, of course, have children much later on. They will be partners for a very long time. She'll kind of serve in a many faceted role around him. They never actually marry each other, even though at certain points in her life she does refer to herself as Mrs. Whistler. And again, if you think about the longevity that they spend many years with each other. In many ways, it is almost an appropriate title. Again, she does have 2 illegitimate children, also by Whistler, but he never actually marries her, again, for different reasons. Instead, he moves on to someone else.